Hello, and welcome to the Center for American Progress. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We are going to begin shortly. So I would just like to remind you to please turn off all electronics, and during the Q&A portion after the panel, we will bring the mic to you when the moderator calls on you, and we ask that you please stand up, say your name and affiliation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Someone nod your head. Thank you. So welcome to the Center for American Progress Action Fund in our event entitled The Presidential Election and Progressive Ideals. Where do the candidates stand and what is at stake? My name is Kelley, and I'm the Executive Director of CAP Action, and I welcome you to today's critical conversation about the country's future. Not in my lifetime has there been more at stake in a single election, nor has a contrast between the candidates been so stark. As Washington policy people, we like to look for the nuggets of difference, right? The nuanced distinctions between policy ideas and proposals of the two candidates. But in this election, there's very little that's nuanced. There are no nuggets. The differences are the size of boulders. And it's fundamentally the difference in understanding what it is that families worry about and what do families need. Example, childcare. What can I afford? Am I leaving my baby in a place that's safe? Am I confident? What do I do when I wake up, I'm sick, my daughter's sick, and my elderly mother needs me, and my employer doesn't offer me paid sick or paid leave? What do you do when you need higher wages, your rent is going up, and your student loans are coming due? What do we need as we look at our children and we want them to understand the concept of living in a country that welcomes the stranger and in a community where they feel safe? So what I'm talking about are not like esoteric concepts, right? This is about conditions. This is about the human condition. And what the American people have to answer in 48 days is who will best understand those conditions and who is going to work so that we are stronger together. Donald Trump is the single most unprepared, unpredictable, unpresidential major party candidate to seek our nation's highest office. He is the bully that I have taught my two daughters to stand up to. Let's consider him on the international stage. The former CIA director, who served under two presidents of both parties, even called Trump an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation. Last month, 50 of the nation's most senior Republican national security advisors signed a letter saying that Donald Trump was, quote, he would be the most reckless president in American history. So we have to ask ourselves, how can Donald Trump keep us safe when he's considered the biggest threat to our nation's security? On his domestic policy proposals, they're equally dangerous. When he was asked to describe the specifics of his economic plan last week, he just said, "I watch the world." This comes from a man who has promised to abolish the minimum wage, to strip health care from millions of people, to deport millions of undocumented immigrants, while slamming the door closed on refugees and banning people from the Muslim faith. It's a world that only revolves around Donald Trump because he's the center of it. So at its core, this election really isn't about policy proposals. It's about a choice in character, right? It's a character of the person we elect, and it's a character of the country that we want to be. So I'm the daughter of immigrants who came to this country from Bolivia and from Colombia. My parents came with little in resources, but with a lot of respect for this country. And what I see in Trump is the worst possible impulses, to think in an us versus them, to mistake prejudice for patriotism, and to turn against those who look different, who speak different, or who pray differently to a different God. So that's the America that Donald Trump is offering. It's dark, it's divided, it's dangerous. But what I see in Trump isn't what I see in this country, right? Like so many families, native-born or newcomer, we choose a different path, and we can show our children the promise that our country holds when we stand together and when we act together. So as I look at this election, and I'm judging the policy proposals and the character of the country that I want my girls to grow up in, what I see in Hillary Clinton is someone who will bring an end to the vicious cycle of mass incarceration that has torn our communities apart. I see someone who understands what it means to strengthen our infrastructure at home and our alliances abroad. I see someone who cares about this planet and making sure it's better for her daughter and for her grandchildren. Someone who wants to grow jobs in the economy and who wants to reform our immigration system. She's about creating opportunities, about building bridges, not walls, and opening doors for all Americans. I'm so proud to work at Cap Action. We share this progressive vision, and today we are honored to be joined by some of America's brightest progressive stars to discuss the way forward. So first, we're going to hear from one of our nation's strongest champions for American families, Senator Elizabeth Warren. I could use a whole hour and a half we have here to tell you guys how cool she is, but I know that you already know. So, whether the senator is taking on big banks that threaten our financial stability, or drug companies that gouge American consumers, or whether she's taking on a reckless, Twitter-obsessed, egotistical bully, I love saying that. Senator Warren, you never back down from the fight. We're so lucky to count you as our steadfast partner in our efforts to address income disparity and grow the middle class. So following the senator's remarks, we're going to be joined by a number of distinguished guests, including the Honorable Tom Perez, my dear longtime friend, Congressman Keith Ellison, Senator Chris Murphy, and our very own Winnie Stackelberg, who'll be moderating the conversation. But first, huge round of applause for one of the coolest senators ever, Senator Warren.
Thank you. Thank you for that very warm introduction. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I'm glad to be here with Cap Action. You know, a few months ago, I came to Cap. In fact, I think it was this very same room to give a presentation about the economic pressures facing America's families. I talked about growing up in an America that created opportunities for working families. Our country wasn't perfect, but it was an America where a minimum wage job could support a family of 3, and a young kid could get a college education at a public university for $50 a semester. But for the past 30 years, the American dream has been moving further and further out of reach for many families. Hardworking men and women across this country bust their tails, some working 2 and 3 jobs. But wages have been flat for generations. Meanwhile, the basic costs of making it from month to month keep going up. Housing, healthcare, childcare costs, they're just out of sight. Young people are getting crushed by student loans. Working people are in debt. Seniors can't stretch a Social Security check to cover the basics. Last week, the Census Bureau delivered some good news. The share of Americans living in poverty dropped substantially, and for the first time in 7 years, median household income rose. And this is truly good news. But before we break out the champagne glasses, it is important to remember that income has not risen for decades, and it is still below the 2007 level. That's a lot of work to do to reverse decades of stagnant wages and income insecurity. And there's another fact, too. Americans aren't just worried about their future, they are also angry. Angry that too often Washington works for those at the top and leaves everyone else behind. Angry that Washington lets giant oil companies guzzle down billions of dollars in tax subsidies, but says there's no money to help kids refinance their student loans. Angry that Washington gives fat tax breaks to corporations for CEO bonuses, but won't raise the minimum wage. Angry that Washington pushes big corporate interests in trade deals, but won't make the investments in infrastructure to create good jobs right here in America. This is not what the American people sent us here to do. And if we're going to change Washington's priorities, then we need to focus on important choices facing the American people in November. So let's start with the big, loud, and I do mean loud, orange elephant in the room, Donald Trump. Trump is a guy who sees that the American people are worried. He knows that people are concerned about economic opportunities slipping away. He knows they are angry about a government in Washington that isn't working for them. So what does he propose to do about it? Well, he's going to make America great again. But when Trump says great, I want to ask, great for who exactly? For millions of kids struggling to pay for an education? For millions of seniors barely surviving on Social Security? No. The truth is, Donald Trump has no real plan to help working families. No plans for college kids, no plans for seniors, no plans to make anything great for anyone except Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies. Now, Donald Trump hasn't really said all that much about what he would actually do as president. He mostly offers caps and vague promises or talks about a stupid wall that will never be built. But let's take a look at a few of the things that Donald Trump actually has said that he would do if he's elected. Donald Trump said he would get rid of the federal minimum wage. Donald Trump said he would roll back the financial regulations and turn Wall Street loose to wreck our economy again. Donald Trump said he would give multimillionaires and wealthy corporations giant tax breaks. Donald Trump said he would renegotiate or default on America's debt, a reckless idea that CAP itself has shown could destroy up to 3 million jobs and cost average homeowners about $72,000 in lost wealth. Now, that's Donald Trump's economic agenda. And frankly, it is an economic agenda that fits perfectly with the life and career of Donald Trump, a guy who looks out for himself first, last, and every step in between. This is a guy who cheered on the 2008 housing crash because he knew it would give him an opportunity to scoop up more real estate on the cheap. This is a guy who set up a fake university so that he could bleed students dry and turn a profit for himself. This is a guy who hired workers to do the hard labor for his businesses and then wouldn't pay them what he promised them. Trump has run so many tax cheat schemes that he's too chicken even to release his tax returns to the public. Now, he may also be afraid to release those tax returns because they would expose his shady foreign financial deals. You know, while he runs around America praising dictators, criticizing our military, and undermining our democracy, he's also running shady cash grabs all over the world, in Russia, in Libya, in Ukraine, in Turkey, in United Arab Emirates, and those are just the ones that we already know about. And when Donald Trump faces a choice between closing down his own money-making schemes and selling out the interests of the United States of America, Donald Trump will do what he's always done: put Donald Trump first, last, and every step in between. A man like that, a man who roots for people to lose their jobs, lose their homes, lose their life savings, a man who cheats workers and cheats students to make a quick buck, a man who threatens our nation's allies while hungrily gobbling up cash from our nation's enemies and their henchmen, that is a man who cares about nobody but himself. Donald Trump offers no solutions for the challenges facing American families, but he thinks he can win votes by fanning the flames of fear and hatred, by turning neighbor against neighbor, by persuading you that the real problem in America is your fellow Americans, people who don't look like you, people who don't talk like you, people who don't worship like you, and by hoping that you will be so busy hating other people that you won't notice that he is temperamentally and morally unfit to be President of the United States. Now, we don't have to elect a thin-skinned racist bully to be our president. We have another choice in November: Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is someone who tells us we are stronger together. I like to think of Hillary as the anti-bully. You know, the classmate who shows up every day and does the work. You know, sometimes you don't notice the girl in the back with the glasses and the backpack sitting quietly. After all, she doesn't poison all the air in the room. She doesn't brag about how great she is, or how she has good words, or how little she reads, or how when anything goes wrong, it's somebody else's fault. She doesn't brag because she's too busy getting things done. You know, Hillary works hard. She works hard for the right things. Hillary Clinton has good values. She has based her entire presidential campaign on progressive values. Look at her explicit commitments and think about what they would mean. Hillary Clinton believes that every kid should have a chance to get an education without getting crushed by debt. And that means debt-free college, and it means refinancing student loans. And it means holding fraudulent for-profit colleges accountable when they break the law. Hillary Clinton believes that we need strong rules to prevent another financial crisis, and that no bank can be too big to fail. That's why she has promised to veto any attempts to roll back Dodd-Frank financial reforms and even to build on those reforms. Hillary Clinton believes that no one who works full-time should live in poverty, and that means raising the minimum wage, fair scheduling, and access to paid family and medical leave. Hillary Clinton believes that no executive should be too powerful to jail, and that means extending statutes of limitations and increasing resources at the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute white-collar criminals. Hillary Clinton believes that billionaires and large corporations must pay their fair share of taxes. And she has proposed closing tax loopholes that allow big companies to get special breaks for sending jobs overseas. Hillary Clinton believes we need the biggest investment in infrastructure since Eisenhower. Hillary Clinton supports a trade agenda that protects American workers, and she has been crystal clear. That means no TPP. Hillary Clinton believes someone making $1 million a year or more should pay a higher tax rate than secretaries, nurses, firefighters, police officers, or teachers. Enough is enough. It is time for the Buffett rule. And I'll do just one more, one that is essential to tackling poverty. Hillary Clinton believes that after a lifetime of hard work, people deserve to retire with dignity, and that means protecting and expanding Social Security. Hillary Clinton has put together a strong, progressive agenda, chock full of policy proposals that will help level the playing field and grow opportunities for working families. Now look, I know it is September of an election year, and that means some of you are nervous. I am nervous. Any chance, even a 1% chance that Donald Trump could be president of the United States is way too much chance for me. But here's the good news. Hillary's agenda isn't just good policy. It's also good politics. People are angry right now. They're looking for the sort of bold economic agenda that Hillary has put forward. I could give you a million statistics on this, believe me, and I would have fun doing it. But I'm just going to give you a couple here. Stan Greenberg recently conducted a poll showing that 82% of independents, 95% of Democrats, and 65% of Republicans, that's 2 out of 3 Republicans, think, and I'm going to quote here, the rules of the economy are rigged in favor of the wealthy and political elites. The poll showed something else, that the public is deeply unhappy with CEOs, with Wall Street, with trickle-down economics. America has had enough of the masters of the universe running the show. Hillary's bold economic agenda is right on policy, and it's also right where the American people are. But let's be blunt. None of this will happen on its own. There is a lot of work to do. It starts with this campaign, and you better believe I am working my heart out to help Hillary Clinton get elected this November. But we also need to remember it is not enough to get Hillary Clinton elected. We also must help her be a successful president. What does that mean? It means getting more Democrats into Congress who will work to write these policies into law. It means we all need to keep working on progressive economic policies and talking about them and fighting for them in public. It means helping surround Hillary Clinton with a cabinet and a team of advisors who believe in the agenda that she has outlined during this campaign. Let's be honest, right here at the Center for American Progress, you know and I know that personnel is policy. And let me be clear, when we talk about personnel, we don't mean advisors who just pay lip service to Hillary's bold agenda, coupled with a sigh, a knowing glance, and the twiddling of thumbs until it's time to take the next swing through the revolving door, serving government and then going back to the very same industries that they regulate. We don't mean Citigroup or Morgan Stanley or BlackRock getting to choose who runs the economy in this country so that they can capture our government. No. This is about people who understand the urgency of the need for rebuilding opportunity in America now, and who will fight for it with everything they've got. People who will fight for every single promise that Hillary Clinton has put forward in this campaign, including her promise to end the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. Those are the kinds of leaders who will help Hillary be a successful president. Now look, we all know that Donald Trump is genuinely scary. So scary, he keeps me up at night. I actually have bad dreams about the man. But I am optimistic. I am optimistic that Hillary will win this election, and I'm optimistic about what a Hillary Clinton presidency can accomplish. A new Democratic presidency is an amazing opportunity for progressive reform. So let's get out there. Let's bust our tails. Let's win this thing. And then let's do everything we possibly can to make sure that she succeeds in rebuilding opportunity, not just for some of our children, but for all of our children. That's what this is about. Thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You fight it out.
Okay.
Absolutely great. Thank you, Senator Warren. That was absolutely fantastic and a great way to start us off. Good afternoon. My name is Winnie Stackelberg. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and I'm thrilled to have you all here and to moderate our next part of this afternoon with three truly remarkable guests. The Honorable Tom Perez has spent his entire career championing progressive policies, from his days battling racial discrimination as a young civil rights lawyer to his work on criminal justice issues with Senator Ted Kennedy, where I actually met Tom for the first time, to his strong leadership at HHS, the Department of Justice, and beyond. Keith Ellison has represented Minnesota's 5th congressional district since 2007. As the first Muslim American ever to be elected to the United States Congress, Congressman Ellison has stood up against racial and religious intolerance and worked tirelessly to expand opportunities for all Americans, no matter their gender, sexual orientation, color, class, or creed. And welcome.
Thank you.
Finally, we are joined by Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who has been a strong and passionate voice on so many critical issues, from college affordability and health care to common sense gun laws and international human rights and national security. And just as a personal note, I want to thank Senator Murphy and Congressman Ellison for being congressional co-chairs of our National Security Leadership Alliance, a new initiative that was launched by CAP Action to promote strong and smart national security policies in the 2016 debate. So without further ado, please welcome our three distinguished panelists and guests. And I want to jump in and get started sort of picking up on where Senator Warren was talking and building off of her comments. And I want to begin with you, Tom, if we can. Senator Warren noted that just last week we received some very positive news, economic news from the census, as you heard. American households are finally seeing their incomes rise and wages, which have been stagnant for a long time, are starting to tick up. Can you talk a little bit about what the keys have been to this progress, and quite frankly, how the next president should build on this economic momentum as we move into 2017 and beyond?
Sure. It's great to be here in my personal capacity, Winnie, and it's great to be back here at CAP. We've come a long way. You look at where we were when President Obama took office, 2.3 million jobs lost in the 3 months before this president took office. An auto industry that was on life support, Republicans saying pull the plug, Democrats saying no. an unemployment rate that was inching toward 10%. You look at where we are now, 71 months in a row of job growth. We had 600,000 people per week that were applying for first-time unemployment benefits at the depths of the recession. Now we've had over a year and a half straight where our first-time claims are under 300,000. That's the longest streak since something like 1970 or 1971. We are moving forward, and you saw in the wage data from the Census Bureau, it's not only that family incomes rose, and they rose larger than any amount since, at a minimum, the late 60s. But you also see the ranks of the healthcare uninsured going down. And you saw that the prosperity from last year was broadly shared. Proportionally, it went up the highest for the folks making the least. That's good news. And that's because we had a president who made courageous investments with a Democratic Congress in things like the stimulus bill, saving the auto industry, investing in skills, fighting for increases in the minimum wage. And that's why Hillary Clinton is so critically important. Because the last thing we want to do when we've gotten the car out of the ditch and onto the road is go back to the failed policies of trickle-down economics. And the distinctions between what Hillary Clinton wants to do and what Donald Trump wants to do on economics couldn't be more stark. Hillary Clinton wants to raise the minimum wage. Donald Trump says a low minimum wage is not a bad thing for America. Hillary Clinton wants to help grow the union movement, which brought us middle-class prosperity. Donald Trump doesn't believe in collective bargaining. Go ask the Trump hotel workers in Nevada who won their vote to form a union, and he refuses to do so. Hillary Clinton wants to invest in infrastructure. That'll gain over 10 million jobs in her first term alone. Donald Trump's proposal, according to John McCain's own 2008 advisor, would bring us into recession. So the differences couldn't be more stark. Hillary Clinton's North Star has always been people who want to enter the middle class, stay in the middle class, and thrive in the middle class. That has been her North Star. And you look at her proposals and Donald Trump's proposals, and why would we fight so hard to get out of this recession and then go back to trickle-down economics? That is why I am spending every ounce of my spare time in my personal capacity for Hillary, because we've made so much progress and we have so much work to do, because we've got to make sure we have shared prosperity for everyone and not just prosperity for a few. When 25 hedge fund managers make more in 1 year than all the kindergarten teachers in America, that's a bellwether that we still have work to do. And Hillary's focused on those kindergarten teachers. Donald Trump is focused on those hedge fund managers.
Senator Murphy, let me ask you sort of a similar question in terms of economic progress that we've made, but much more that needs to be done. Can you talk a little bit from where you sit about how the next president is going to build on those, especially with an eye toward college affordability, family-friendly workplace policies, things that are really going to help our economy grow, help young people, help women and families really move into the middle class and stay ahead?
So we live in a new economic reality today in which it is virtually required for you to have a 16th grade education in order to be able to afford to live in America. And we live in another new reality, which is where work is becoming more flexible, where individuals want to have more power over their own lives. And the fact of the matter is, as disastrous as Donald Trump's policies are when it comes to his continued belief in investment in a handful of elites and trust that it will filter down to the rest of us, he also has no ideas that will continue to bring us into these new modern economic realities. And so Hillary Clinton has a bold proposal on college affordability, which seeks to get us to the point where students of limited and middling means won't ever have to borrow money in order to go to school. And when we think about our path forward as a country, and I think about that in particular when it comes to a higher cost state like Connecticut, our salvation is the education of our workforce. Our ability to succeed globally is dependent on our ability to feed into the high skill, high value added jobs that are the jobs of the future. And to recognize that if students are spending their 20s and their 30s and their 40s paying back their student loans instead of putting money into the Main Street economy, then no one grows. The middle doesn't grow, the top doesn't grow, the bottom doesn't grow. And so I'm so enthusiastic about her policies to try to give people more flexibility in the workplace, to recognize family demands that will frankly create more stability and more pathways for advancement. But as one of the few members of the Senate who's still paying back my own student loans, I frankly know how that burden is crippling young Americans today, how it's preventing them from addressing the looming retirement crisis, and how it's holding back our nation's growth. Because I'm sitting every day with middle income and low income high school students who have no dreams of going to college because they are just convinced that they can't afford it. Incrementalism doesn't really do it for them. And the fact of the matter is, in this election, Hillary Clinton is proposing a bold plan to make college a reality for those students. And I have never heard Donald Trump talk about making college affordable. Not only does he not have a plan, but he doesn't give a damn about the plight of students who are trying to face this potential mountain of debt.
Congressman Ellison, I want to weave you into this conversation, and just in talking about Donald Trump having a plan or not having a plan, talk a little bit about sort of family flexibility and issues. Most mothers of young children are in the labor force, and yet the United States remains the only advanced country on earth that doesn't guarantee some form of paid leave for its citizens.
Right.
This isn't just a woman's issue. This is a family issue. And I'm sure in the conversations that you have with people in Minnesota, you see this. Instead of helping parents and families, Donald Trump has released a family leave plan that could exclude nearly 10 million single mothers and with young children in the United States, not to mention
forget the men.
fathers, not
Yep,
to mention
yep.
fathers, parents who adopt,
Right.
and same-sex couples. So what effect does this lack of family flexibility have on our overall economy as you see it from your perch in Minnesota and the conversations that you're having?
Well, lack of a family leave policy definitely stifles our economy and weakens people's options. But, when I think about how important it is to have the right president, I just got off the phone with my mom, and I asked her. I said, "Ma, you kept our family together after our dad had a stroke. You went through a time when if you needed to get access to contraception or other sort of reproductive services, or if you needed leave, those things really weren't available to you." And I guess I asked people to ask themselves, what kind of chance do we have in front of us to have a leader, first woman president she'll be, who on a real personal and level understands how key it is for people to be able to have family leave, to get paid fairly, to have access to health care, to be able to take care of other family members. I remember my mom had to take care of not just my grandpa, but her great aunt, and she was taking care of us. So family leave policy, not just for the kids, it's for the parents too. And if we don't have the right policy, we're literally keeping talented people out of the workforce. We're saying we're going to abandon our kids or our parents, or we're going to deprive somebody of the opportunity to be in the workforce. Why can't we have both? Other countries have decided that they can have both. America can have both too. And so I think that it is critical that we have a leader who has a vision for an inclusive family medical leave policy and paid sick, earned sick policy, so that we can really have a modern economy. Most of the people in our workforce are female at this time. That's the majority. What about a policy that reflects the needs that so often, not all the time, but so often, women are the caregivers in our society? Not like Tom said, men too, but we know who mostly pulls that heavy oar. And we've got to have an economy that reflects that and a leader that cares about that. But as Tom said, and as Chris said, you know, don't just look at Trump, and also don't only look at Secretary Clinton's policies. Compare the two, right? On the one hand, you got one, you know, you talk about what is Donald Trump's education policy. Trump University, scam students, pay, perhaps, you know, be friends with the Attorney General in Florida. Make sure you don't ever have to be accountable. And on the other hand, you got somebody who has a bold, clear plan to make sure that students can fully participate in the economy and don't have to go into massive debt just to get an education. Same for family medical leave policy. His is going to lock millions out. Hers is going to include millions at the same time. So this race is a big deal. And I think that we got to embrace the historic moment that we're in and understand the tremendous chance we have to really make even more progress based on what Tom said, you know, not just to have more job growth, but to have better jobs, to have more quality jobs, jobs that really reflect the needs of the American people. And I'm excited about the possibility, but I'm a little nervous because I'm just hoping everybody gets it and that folks get out there and tell the story.
You know, Senator Murphy hit the nail on the head. Hillary Clinton understands that we need to eliminate the term educational mortgage from the American vocabulary, plain and simple. And she has a plan to do it, and she has a way to pay for it. Hillary Clinton understands that we're the only industrialized nation on the planet that doesn't have some form of sensible paid leave system. She understands that the things that keep parents up at night are, you know, how am I going to pay for child care tomorrow? How can I reflect the fact that my child care bill exceeds my rent or mortgage in many circumstances? And you know, her proposals are rooted in reality. They're not part of the Mad Men universe where we'll give paid leave for some subset of married women. They're rooted in today's realities, which is we want people to enjoy the most remarkable time in their lives, the time that you give birth to your child, and we want you to have access to those times in their lives where you need to take care of your loved one who may be on their deathbed. So the reach, both the scope of her proposal, 12 weeks, and the reach of it. So you're not only taking care of your child after the remarkable birth or adoption of that child, but you're also taking care of that loved one who in fact took care of you. She's in this Modern Family universe, and he called Ozzie and Harriet up for advice on his proposal. And that is why you know, I get a little passionate about this, because we need people who are change agents who've got a demonstrated track record of fighting for these issues. And whether it's kids, whether it's health care, whether it's college affordability, you know, this has been her life's work. And you know, when you can tell a lot about a person and what they're going to do in the future by looking at what they did in the past. And that's been her whole life, is fighting for, you know, folks who are struggling to make ends meet. And that's why, as a proud progressive Democrat, you know, I have been so excited to get out there for her and get that message out, because there's a lot of clutter out there. And elections are indeed, as the congressman says, about choices. And the choices are pretty stark.
Absolutely. I want to make a slight jump here from the set of domestic issues and the economy that we're talking about, but they're connected to our national security issues and things that keep us all up at night. This weekend's attacks in Manhattan and Minnesota are another reminder that we must be vigilant about both domestic and international terrorism. The vicious attacks in Europe this summer show that even though ISIS has lost much ground, they still pose a serious threat. I want to ask, start with you, Senator Murphy. What do you think about the difference in visions between the two candidates as it relates to global leadership against terrorist groups and other international security challenges?
Well, every time that we witness another one of these attacks, people understand at a deeper level how serious this job is, that being President of the United States and getting it wrong is the difference between life and death. And one of the reasons that I'm so strongly supportive of Hillary Clinton is because I know that she's going to show up on day one with the skill set necessary to protect this country. And I'm absolutely convinced that Donald Trump is going to get people killed. He's going to get people killed in this country, and he's going to get people killed abroad. Now, we can talk about his radical proposals to walk away from long-term strategic alliances that the United States has with NATO or with countries in Asia. We can talk about the way in which he has strangely cozied up to Vladimir Putin, which signals that ultimately his foreign policy may be more about what makes him money and what gets a return on his investment than what protects America. But as you stated, there is this undeniable connection between domestic policy and foreign policy. And we live in a world today in which the real threat to this nation are these lone wolf attackers. And what we know from watching our friends in Europe is that the way to guarantee that young men and women are going to feel so socially isolated that they want to do harm to their fellow brothers and sisters is to tell every member of a particular religious faith that they don't belong in this country. That's the quickest way to ultimately get yourself in a real position of trouble. And so these politics of exclusion that are frankly the foundation of Trump's campaign, that's going to make this country dramatically less safe. The reason why ISIS is openly rooting for a Trump victory is because they know that he will give them daily bulletin board material with which to recruit soldiers in the United States and outside of the United States. This really is ultimately a matter of life and death.
You know, I remember sitting there watching Khizr and Ghazala Khan talk about their fallen son with such tremendous tenderness, you know. And I'm kind of an old crusty guy, but I even got a little misty when they talked about him. And it occurred to me that, you know, at Hillary Clinton's Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, 7 Muslims were able to address the convention. Sherman Jackson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the Khan family, myself, Andre Carson, Debbie Al-Muntasser. I mean, she's not talking inclusion, she's doing inclusion. She's making it so that all of us feel a part of this American family. And on the other hand, you look at that other convention, he is just signaling that stuff that Chris just mentioned. You're not a part, you're not of us, you're not welcome. And I'm telling you, one makes you feel good and proud, and the other one kind of makes you kind of scared. And I'll just say this. It might be that these terrorist groups, it is a fact that they're evil, bad, and crazy, but they're not stupid. And I think it's important to be clear they're not stupid. They have a strategy. They know they cannot take the battlefield against the United States. So what do? They do things that they hope will have us turn on each other. And so they actually are hoping that that we will abandon our clear principles of due process, equal protection, and they're hoping to get the dander up of Americans to sort of turn on perhaps the Muslim community. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, is forthrightly being inclusive as George W. Bush was. This guy is signaling exactly what the terrorist narrative is, which is that Islam and the West are at war, which is not true, has never been true. But when he puts that rhetoric out there, he does not make us safer. He actually just makes this world a whole lot more volatile and scary.
You know, diplomacy is about building bridges with your allies. It's about strength through humility and being a good listener. And Hillary Clinton has demonstrated that. When you see what she did in Burma, you see so many examples of her ability to forge partnerships. The Iran nuclear issue.
Awesome.
She laid the foundation for that. And you have to be a good listener. And you know, when I hear things like, I know more about ISIS than the generals, that one's truly remarkable. And so again, as voters think about these issues of national security, You know, we are most secure when we have strong allies that are there with us. And she gets that, and he doesn't. It's as simple as that.
And think about his ability to sit down with Muslim nations, with Middle Eastern partners, after he has just banned every single one of their citizens from entering the United States. You don't get that audience. You don't get the ability to do diplomacy. And the reality of the situation is that the only way that you get to peace in a place like Yemen or a place like Syria is through a political solution, is through American-led diplomacy. But by ordering the world in a way that Christians are over here and Muslims are over here, he essentially forsakes the ability to try to lead these places through peace. And this idea that he's got a secret plan, right? It's ridiculous. Hillary Clinton, it will show you her plan, right? She will sit down and tell you why she believes in safe zones inside Syria to protect civilians from attack. She will talk about her belief that we need new ways to engage in the Middle East to help build whole economic communities, to try to push back against the propaganda that has so far gone uncontested in too many parts of the globe. She's going to put in front of you the ways in which she is going to make conflicts less inflammatory, make this country more secure. Donald Trump is lying to you when he says that he's just waiting until the election to decide what the difference is between Hezbollah and Hamas, something he didn't know just about 6 months ago.
Well, he didn't know that Russia was in Ukraine.
Yeah,
He didn't. There's a lot of stuff this guy is missing the boat on.
Well, on that sort of another shocking moment, and there have been several shocking moments, especially in this national security sphere with Donald Trump, was when Donald Trump was actually encouraging Russian hackers to breach American security. Sort of what do you make of Trump's encouragement of hacking and his sort of consistent praise? You talked a little bit about his praise of Vladimir Putin, and what implications does that have for our national security? In addition to the comments that you've made about our alliances, what are the implications for our national security if you've got someone who is actually encouraging hacking?
Well, it's disastrous for U.S. national security. There's not a single person who exists in the foreign policy sphere in this country who would suggest that the way in which you solve the problem of Russia is to cozy up next to them. And I would just suggest that there's something else going on here. I'm trying to figure out why Trump won't release his tax returns. And it's probably because there are some embarrassing numbers in there. It's probably because he's paid little to no taxes. But it's also probably because those tax returns would show some pretty significant sources of money coming from Russia, coming from oligarchs in that country. His son has stated that they have major investments, major business relationships there. I don't think it's out of bounds to read Trump's bizarre positioning, absolutely bizarre positioning on Russia and Ukraine as a play to make himself and his family richer. And if he were to show you his tax returns, you would probably see that he is planning to conduct foreign policy in a way that pads his bottom line, not in a way that protects this country.
You know, on the email thing you asked about, you know, in Watergate, some people physically broke into the Democratic National Headquarters to find documents. And they did it to win an election for domestic purposes. This time they do the same thing, but through cyber means, arguably to the benefit and of a foreign hostile power. To me, this is more upsetting than Watergate. It should be more disturbing. If you look at this thing and sort of compare and contrast them, what he did is beyond outrageous. It's shocking that it hasn't gotten a whole lot more attention. And I just think that for everybody who, you know, loves this country, I mean, can you think about a major party nominee encouraging hacking by a hostile foreign power of their fellow countrymen and women. I mean, just imagine if Hillary Clinton did that. You know, the bottom line is, you know, she has conducted herself with poise, grace, class, and respect throughout this race. And I'm proud to see her doing it, and I hope she continues to do it. But I mean, you know, this particular hacking incident to me is outrageous.
Well, let me cut to the chase. I mean, Vladimir Putin is an autocratic strongman who has demonstrated repeatedly a reckless disregard for human rights and basic rule of law. And to express such regard for a person tells you a lot about perhaps the governing style of that person who seems to be genuflecting on the altar of such a man. Hillary Clinton has stood up repeatedly to strong men, and she understands what you need to do to deal with them. And we live in turbulent times, and we need someone who is a steady hand. And she has been a steady hand for many years. This is a chance that we can't afford to take with a guy who genuflects on the altar of people that don't deserve to be in the church.
I want to talk about an issue that the three of you have really spoken eloquently about in the past, of community policing and criminal justice. The recent police shootings of Terrence Crutcher in Tulsa, Keith Lamont Scott in Charlotte are yet another reminder of the dangerous racial inequality embedded in our criminal justice system, coming after a summer that saw tragic deaths. It's clear that radical change is needed. How do you build trust between communities of color and law enforcement, and what steps can the next president take to ensure that our criminal justice system is truly just?
Well, you know, when the young people involved, Black Lives Matter, went to a Hillary Clinton rally and demanded to be heard, she did something that I don't think all politicians do. She listened. She got in a conversation. She came up with a plan of action based on not just their recommendations, but on a whole host. I think that the leader of our country needs to listen, and Hillary Clinton is an excellent listener, and beyond that, needs to really have empathy, not before policy, empathy for the people who are raising their voices, but also members of law enforcement who have been at risk too, and whose job it is to go out there and try to protect us. And I think that what she has done is try to strike the proper balance so that we can, one, feel protected and safe, also have our human rights, and then also demonstrate some empathy for how we might move forward. So her plan that involves increasing community relations dialogue, that involves use of things like perhaps body cams, things like that, training, retraining. You know, now we need to really see, officers should see themselves, and we need to see them as guardian, not as warrior. And so I think that she has done what we would expect a responsible leader to do in this situation, which is quite a contrast to what Donald Trump has done, which is to inflame the situation.
You know, Hillary Clinton asks the right questions and urges us not to have false choices and not to ask the wrong questions. I've spent a lot of time in this space in a prior life. I've been to communities. I have profound respect for law enforcement. The right question to ask is not, are you on the community's side or are you on the police's side? We can either have law and order or respect for the Constitution. Can't do both. That's a false choice, and Hillary Clinton gets that. And that's why she doesn't ask, whose side are you on? Because every police officer that she's spoken to and that I've spoken to understands that if you don't have the trust and respect of the community, you can't do your job. And so that's what she's doing, bringing people together, understanding that you can build effective, democratically accountable, and constitutional police departments. And what you have to do, among other things, as she has discussed, is make sure that your police department reflects the diversity of the communities that you're serving. That's critically important. And you need to make sure in the process of doing that, that again, you're building a big table. And she has done that. And you know what? I've spoken with her on this issue as much as anything. And we can accomplish this, folks. I'm chronically optimistic. I prosecuted a police officer at LAPD pre-Rodney King. I had hair, I had no replacement parts, okay? I saw an LA Police Department that was broken. This was pre-Rodney King. And now you fast forward. the Los Angeles Police Department is a qualitatively different and better police department. Is it perfect? No. Is it qualitatively better? Yes. And they did it by engaging the community, by recognizing that these forces that people like Donald Trump say, oh, you're just divisive. No, you deserve a seat at the table. That's what was said. We build a big table. We make sure we listen to the frontline police officers. We make sure we build systems of accountability. And we have external oversight. We don't fear it. And that's what happened in Los Angeles. We can address this issue, and Hillary Clinton understands how to. And rather than fanning the flames of division by saying we can't have constitutional policing, we've just got to have law and order, she's doing it the smart way. And that is why I have every bit of confidence that in a Hillary Clinton presidency, we can build on the progress that we have made to date and take it to scale.
This country is still this wonderful ongoing experiment, right? Nobody has done what we have been able to do, which is to bring together people of different faiths and backgrounds and beliefs and fold them into something that is uniquely whole. And presidents are at their best when they recognize those divisions and instead of exacerbating them, try to reduce them. I mean, what if George Bush hadn't gone to a mosque the 5th day after September 11th? What if he had chosen to come out of that crisis and choose to divide the nation into two? For all the mistakes I think he made, at the very least, he didn't fall into that trap. Sure. And you think about these crises that the next president will meet. And you think about the very different ways in which these two candidates are going to approach them. Donald Trump will assess the crisis, decide who's on which side and who's on the other, take a side, right, and then just push Americans apart from each other. Hillary Clinton's going to approach all of these challenges very differently. And I think about the choices that we've made and the conduct of our previous presidents, and Republican or Democrat, at those moments, they have tended to try to bring folks together. Donald Trump is basically telling you that he will take a very new tact in crisis management that has the potential ultimately to tear the country apart. Hillary Clinton, her entire career has been about taking on tough issues and trying to bring people together.
There's a long list of issues that Donald Trump has used to divide this country. I think one of them no more than immigration. Just spend a moment talking about that as Donald Trump has called for the deportation of 11 million undocumented immigrants, creation of a deportation force. He's promised to build a wall on the southern border, as Senator Warren talked about earlier. But we know that study after study show that immigrants make critical contributions to the country and to the economy. If it weren't just the right thing to do, there's an economic value as well. But if Trump is elected, his immigration plan would impact our nation's security, as we talked about earlier, and the economic growth. How important is comprehensive immigration reform to the progressive blueprint? And the two visions couldn't be more starkly contrasting here.
Well, Americans have a choice. Do you want to have comprehensive immigration reform that is responsive to the needs of our country, or build a wall? Build a wall is not just a policy, it's a metaphor for who and what he offers our nation. Build a wall is his whole policy on everything. Divide people, put walls between them. But I'm gonna tell you this, I'm an Emma Lazarus American, I believe that America does need to be a place that is welcoming to immigrants. Vetting, sure, we've got to do the due process thing and make sure that we abide by the proper procedures. But at the end of the day, this is a nation that is made up of people who immigrated here, except for Native Americans. And I could tell you, talking to parents of Latinos and people who may be from the Middle East or Muslim communities who literally feel afraid at what kind of policy this guy might bring forward. They feel scared. I have parents telling me I had to assure my 7-year-old that we're not going to be put out of the country. I'm telling you that if you are thinking about what you want to do in this election, there can be no doubt that we have got to go out to all new Americans and let them know that the best use of their vote in this election is going to be for the person who's going to keep America this great and welcoming country that has always been this place that welcomes people in, as opposed to this nativist thing where we want to lock people out.
You know, Winnie, I've been to about 16 or 17 states in my capacity as a Hillary surrogate, and I think the moment I remember the most was in Nevada before the Nevada caucuses. And I invite all of the listeners to Google Hillary Clinton immigration Nevada and type in Carla. Carla is a 10-year-old girl that I met out there. And Carla, they had a little town hall, and Carla said to the secretary, you know, I'm scared. I'm scared for my parents. I'm scared about their getting deported. And Hillary sat on her lap and said, you let me do the worrying. I don't want you to do the worrying. And I promise I will fight for you. It was just one of those moments. And then after the cameras had been gone, we were at an event one night, and Carla came back in after the event. We were sitting there with a group of dreamers. And Carla walks in, and she makes a beeline, almost knocks her over. And for the next 15 minutes, they just sat there. She had the secretary in a bear hug. She's about half her size. And we talked about the moral imperative of immigration reform. If you are someone who believes in family values, the value of family unification's a pretty core family value. If you're someone who is concerned about the Social Security Trust Fund or the Medicare Trust Fund, you should be for immigration reform, because the bill that Senator Murphy voted for in the Senate would sustain the Medicare Trust Fund and the Social Security Trust Fund, because you got more people paying into it. If you are concerned about growing GDP in this country, you want to vote for that bill that Senator Murphy voted for. Congressman Ellison would have voted for it, but John Boehner didn't let it come up for a vote. And so this is a moral imperative. It's an economic imperative. It's a national security imperative. It's really about who we are. And I'm not sure there's an issue where the differences are more stark. And I invite you to watch that video, because you want to get a window into who she is. Just watch that. It really is about a leader who has both passion and compassion, and someone whose North Star is totally pointed in the right direction, trying to help folks who are living in the shadows get into the sunshine. The differences couldn't be more stark. And I travel around the world for this job, and the question that I get asked by labor ministers everywhere I go and others, they understand that this isn't simply an election about who has a better plan for the economy. The world is watching us. They're trying to figure out, our values. This is an election about whether e pluribus unum still means something in America. And that's why so many foreign leaders that I end up talking to are asking that question. And the world is watching in this election in ways that they haven't watched before. They want to figure out, are we on Le Pen's side, or are we on the side of e pluribus unum? Are we going to go down that road of division, or are we going to go down that road of uniting? Are we going to choose hope, or are we going to choose fear? And there's no issue that I think that embodies it more for me and for so many than the immigration issue.
I think that's a really important point. We don't live in a bipolar world any longer where your choice is to align with the United States or the Soviet Union. You've got a lot of suitors for allegiance and alliance. And so now the image that you project, the values that you portray to the rest of the world, they matter more than ever, because the field is pretty crowded when it comes to who's going to eventually win more friends and influence more countries. And so our values are important. But just imagine what would have happened if we had thrown up a wall right as the first waves of German immigrants or Italian immigrants or Irish immigrants came to this country. Imagine if we threw up a wall to stop the Jewish refugees or the Vietnamese refugees come to this country. Who would we be as a nation? We'd be fundamentally different than we are today, and a nation that none of us would recognize. This is certainly a moral imperative, but as Tom said, it's also an economic imperative. All of that economic growth that this country experienced to make us the most powerful economy in the world came because of immigration. To the extent that people in Europe and Asia are envious of the future economic growth of this country, it's because between now and 2030, the average age of the United States only grows by 2 years, whereas most European and Asian countries, their average age moves into the late 40s or late 50s, meaning that their budgets start to become fundamentally broken. We capture the workforce of the future. We keep our entitlement programs solvent because of our commitment to immigration. And so to me, this is of course a question about the fundamental nature of America, but Hillary Clinton supports comprehensive immigration reform because she also understands that continuing to allow for this country's workforce to remain as big or bigger than the size of its retiree force is part of what allows us to leapfrog the rest of the world when it comes to the global recovery.
I want to ask a question. We're talking about an election, so I want to ask a question about voting. This November is going to be the first presidential election since the Supreme Court invalidated crucial voting protections in 2013. Republican lawmakers across the country are trying to block millions of Americans, especially people of color, but not only, from voting. What impact, obviously, would this have on the election process? And how do we ensure that every American has equal access to the ballot? This is another one of these issues, I think, where there's a clear distinction between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. If you each could talk a little bit about sort of the Voting Rights Act, voting in this country, and what's at stake in this election from a perspective of the election itself and voting.
Well, one of the things we know about North Carolina, where we're very happy that their very restrictive voting laws were struck down. Also, that happened in Wisconsin to a certain extent and other places. But one of the things about North Carolina is that they were able to show, as they challenged that voting rights restriction, that the Republican Party was researching which part of the population had less driver's licenses. So when they passed their driver's license requirement, they had racial exclusion in mind. I'm telling you, the Voting Rights Act is incredibly important. It's nice to have a president who believes that everybody ought to get to vote. That's nice. In a democracy, good idea. And I can tell you that that's one of the other things that I really urge people to consider about this election. Hillary Clinton has a lifelong history of devotion to getting people access to the ballot, including more and more people. And I'm going to tell you, our country, we had the lowest voter turnout in the OECD in 2014, lowest. And you know, in Ferguson, and I'm sure Tom knows a lot about Ferguson, my reading is that only 12% of the people who were eligible to vote in the election before Mike Brown got shot were voting. Clearly, voting participation translates into services, translates into your quality of life, and Hillary Clinton is very much in favor of and has fought her whole life to extend voting rights to everybody. At the same time, this is not just Trump. This is Trump, but even more than Trump. Remember, we're not just dealing with Trump, we're dealing with Trumpism, right? Trump's curtilage and everything he greenlights, you know, all this taking away same-day voter registration like they did in North Carolina, requiring proof of citizenship to vote as they did in Alabama. All of this stuff is how they know that their numbers aren't right. So rather than have a debate on the issues, they just want to restrict who gets to participate in the election. And it's nice to have a president who believes that we ought to be able to vote, who will choose an attorney general, and who will be fully in favor of enforcing our rights. And until we get a Voting Rights Act passed, which she stands foursquare in doing, we're going to have somebody who's going to enforce that Article 2 provision. You still can't discriminate against people in voting, but what we've lost pre-clearance, the need for somebody who's going to be vigilant and aggressive to protect the right to vote is even greater than before, not to mention the Supreme Court and the choices she will get to make as to who will occupy that space as it relates to voting.
The right to vote is connected to the way in which voting and politics is influenced today, right? And so you have to have a conversation as well about the way in which big money and a handful of mega billionaires have been able to sort of pull at the marionette strings of American democracy today. Hillary Clinton is the only candidate in this race that recognizes the corrupting power of big money. She's the only candidate that's promised to move forward on a repeal of the Citizens United decision, to move forward on some new process for funding elections, so we're not so reliant on this big money. And Donald Trump proudly talks about the fact that his entire history as a businessman was about making donations to individuals in order to get what he wanted. He has long advertised the benefit of the pay-to-play economy for him and his friends, and there's no doubt that he is going to keep that pay-to-play economy and be the welcome recipient of those dollars from his cronies who want something out of a Trump administration. So, when you're talking about the right to vote, one of the things that chills people's interest in participation is the belief that they aren't the influencers of what happens in government today, that it's just a handful of moneyed elites. Donald Trump is basically going to turn the keys over to the government to those folks because he was part of it as a donor into government. Hillary Clinton is talking virtually every single day about her belief that we've got to build a different system.
I'm going to give you the last word on this, and then I'm going to ask our audience if they've got a question or two before we wrap up.
I was at the tip of the spear at the Civil Rights Division on these things, and I saw firsthand these voter ID laws and what they were all about. Really easy. It wasn't subtle. It was about making it harder for African Americans and Latinos to vote. And frankly, there were some folks like a legislator in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin who said that.
Yep.
So they acknowledged it. You could, a hunting license in Texas was a permissible form of ID, but your university ID from the University of Texas, Austin, was not a permissible ID. Some people had to travel 120 miles or more to get access to an ID. So we know what those are all about. Hillary Clinton wants to make sure we not only solidify our infrastructure, our highway infrastructure, our ports infrastructure, she wants to solidify our infrastructure of democracy. That's why she talks so much about democratic policing. That's why she talks so much about making sure that women have an equal opportunity to participate, that Muslims and Sikhs, who are so frequently targeted in today's world, can live with dignity. And that is why she talks so much about voting rights. And one of the worst decisions, and if this voting issue illustrates one thing, as the senator said, and the congressman, these laws came about as a result of a really bad decision from the Supreme Court arising out of Indiana on voter ID laws. Justice Stevens has said publicly it was the worst decision that he made as a Supreme Court justice. We are now at 4-4. And one of the many reasons I am excited about a Hillary Clinton presidency is although we lost the Voting Rights Act case, one of my lowest days in government service, we have an opportunity now for the first time to have a Supreme Court majority who will correct this. And that, if there's one reason that's in my top 5 list, I actually have about a top 30 list, it is this issue, because we have to fortify this infrastructure of democracy. And it was so tragic to me to go down and celebrate or commemorate the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday and reflect on the fact that 50 years later we're playing defense on voting rights. That's not who we are as a nation. And I know that's not who Hillary Clinton is. And I know that she's going to be fighting to make sure that everybody who's eligible to vote can vote. And when you say things like, the only way she can win Pennsylvania is by fraud, which is what Donald Trump said, that's one of many dog whistles that he's blowing about fanning the flames of folks who want to divide America. We know what that's about. That's not subtle either. And that's why the best way to deal with this is to do what happened in 2012, where 90 and 100-year-old women were sitting at the polls down in Miami until midnight. Because you know what? If you're going to make it slow, you are not going to deny me the right to vote. I will sit here as long as necessary. And that is why I love this country, because people will not let folks make it impossible for them to vote.
Fantastic, thanks. I want to turn it over to our audience for the couple of questions. This gentleman up here. You just state your name and pose a
Sure,
question.
I'm Dave Katniss with U.S. News and World Report. I was wondering from each of the panelists how Hillary Clinton ensures she wins the first debate against such an unpredictable opponent like Donald Trump.
Well, you know, in basketball, they'll tell you make sure that you watch the trunk of the body and you know and you don't go for the head fakes, right? I think that I mean, if I'm not consulting Secretary Clinton about a debate, but I'll just say I think she just sticks to the things that she has always done to be successful. She talks about children. She talks about economic opportunity in our country. She talks about how people who she's met, who've helped her understand in a very personal way how important it is that we have earned sick and family medical leave. I think that she should show that, you know, she's in touch, just how in touch she is with everybody. She talks about Carla and the kids she's met who need comprehensive immigration reform. And then I hope she speaks up strong for One America, and to say, look, you know, people are going to try to get you afraid of your neighbor, but, you know, we've always been best when we embraced our neighbor. And I think that I would counsel, you know, do those things that brought you to the point of success that you're at right now, and don't go away from those things.
Hillary Clinton's a change agent, and I think the American people will see again on Monday how she has been a change agent on behalf of so many people who need help. And you know, the difference between these two candidates can be really boiled down to pronouns. She has been all about we. You know, we're stronger together. How do we help everyone? And he has been all about me. And I think when you talk about the differences in their proposals, whether it's growing the economy, whether it's immigration, whether it's national security, that is where I think she'll kick his butt.
People are going to watch this debate and they're going to make their own conclusions, but they're also going to watch how this debate is covered. And so, you know, I put the question back. Donald Trump is going to tell 20 to 30 lies over the course of the debate. Hillary Clinton is going to tell the truth. And, you know, the question is, what standard is Donald Trump held to in this debate? And are we going to all be vigilant to make sure that in the aftermath, we correct the record in as many ways as possible and call him out for you know, what will just be an ongoing mythology that he's going to try to create over the course of that hour and a half. So, you know, I think that Hillary has a responsibility to make this proactive case. I think he'll likely do some damage to himself. But in the end, if the expectation going in is that, you know, Donald Trump just stays on 2 feet and isn't called out for the fact that he will likely misrepresent his record and facts about this country, you know, then the deal gets a little bit tougher for her.
On the aisle here.
Hi, my name is Jane Zimmerman, and I'd like to ask you, what about a second worst case scenario in which we have a Democratic White House but a Republican Congress? How much of this agenda still holds, and what would you advise President Clinton on her top 2 or 3 achievable priorities?
Well, I think that Keith can talk to the House of Representatives, but I'm confident that if Hillary Clinton wins the election, then she's going to have a Democratic Senate. And, you know, regardless of what happens in the House, that matters, because when we talk about nominees to the Supreme Court, when we talk about making sure that she's got progressive champions in the administration, there is no doubt that if Mitch McConnell was in charge, he would do everything possible to block any and all of those appointments, just like he's done to President Obama. That will be very different. So I think if she wins the election, I think that we're going to have control of the Senate. I'll just make my own pitch for rules reform in the Senate. You know, I hope that we are not going to allow Republican minority leader in the Senate to do to Hillary Clinton what he did to Barack Obama, to essentially put up a impenetrable wall of resistance from day one. I hope that we take a look at our own rules to make sure that the will of the American public, which I think will be to elect a Democratic Senate, actually plays out and how legislation moves through the process.
You know, I tell you, I think that, I mean, we're always hopeful and optimistic. I think people feel a little bit better about taking the Senate than the House. But if we go out there and trumpet the story of Hillary Clinton and her lifelong service to extending opportunity to everybody, her dynamic problem-solving ability, you know, we might be able to get the kind of win that we need. But I think we've got to think about creating our own win. You know, rather than just say, let her go give a big speech. We've got to amplify and magnify what she's doing to impact some of these House races and state legislative races as well, because so much happens at the state level. I mean, when they attack us on voting rights, for example, it's at the state level. But I'll tell you also, I think there's a lot of good that a progressive, active president like Hillary Clinton can do. And I think that it's better to have a House and Senate that can help you. But, you know, when I think about some of the important things that President Obama has done with regard to pay equity, model employee inclusion on the workforce, stuff he did for the LGBTQ community and civil rights, there's a lot you could do. So the main thing that we cannot do is get pessimistic. We got to keep fighting. We got to push every opportunity. And then on top of that, I think that she will continue to reach out, even if she has to deal with the Republicans in the House, in the majority, and try to find a way forward. Because, you know, look, we did some things on opioid. It's a sin and a shame we haven't done anything on Zika. We've got to do something on immigration reform. She should put enough pressure on them to make sure that they either come along with good policy or that they're exposed to be the obstructionists that they are. But I don't think, I think that there's still opportunity in either scenario. But of course, we're doing all we can to get the majority.
I think we're going to have somewhere between 51 and 55 seats in the Senate. And as to the House, I remember vividly 1994, everyone was talking about how the Democrats were going to lose the Senate. Nobody in the media, virtually nobody, was talking about what was happening in the House. And I'm seeing some remarkable things in the House, seats that I never would have thought were in play that are in play because of her vision and because of his vision. And the thing I think that's most important is that Hillary Clinton has a proven track record of working together with Republicans and Democrats. There are a lot of Republican senators who have a sock in their mouth now, and I understand that because it's an election cycle, but they worked very constructively with her, dating back to her time as First Lady, whether it was children's health insurance, whether it was immigration reform with Senator McCain and Senator Kennedy, whether it's in the aftermath of 9/11 on a host of things. And so she understands how to reach out. And regardless of the composition of the House and the Senate, I think she has a proven track record of getting things done. And that's why, and that's what America wants. I mean, the reason the Republican Party is in disarray is because Mitch McConnell made his #1 priority to make Barack Obama a one-term president. And so they're trying to figure out why their rank and file are so angry at him. It's because they didn't listen to him. When you don't raise the minimum wage, you're not just screwing Democrats, you're screwing the American people. And so I don't know how much longer the Republican leadership can make as their #1 priority making the Democratic president a one-term president, because they shoot themselves in the foot. And they're really inconsistent with who we are as a nation.
May I just add this? There's a district right next to mine that everybody kind of thought was going to be a reliably Republican district, and the Democrats up by 2. That's Terry Bonoff. And, these polls have a lot of noise in them, but I mean, Donald Trump and a good candidate like Terry can create opportunity. And I think that We've just got to be there to seize it and to get out there and knock some doors and make some calls. And again, like I said, make the win, make the wave that we want to see happen.
And to Tom's last point, there may be a reckoning in the Republican Party after a loss in the presidential race where they start to look at these issues like immigration reform, right? And start to think to themselves, well, we can't ever win another presidential election if we're only getting 30% of the Hispanic vote, and we've got to come to the table on this issue. They may look at a handful of races that got decided on the issue of background checks and recognize that if they're going to continue to support terrorists getting guns, they're going to have a hard time picking up seats when national security is on the ballot. So, it would be an exceptional thing to have a Democratic president elected after a two-term Democratic administration. And Republicans may step back and say, as Tom said, maybe this policy of obstruction doesn't work. Maybe we got to get right on a handful of these issues to take them off the table when it comes to the next presidential election. I wish they got to the issue of attacking gun violence or passing comprehensive immigration reform for policy reasons, but if they get there for political reasons, it still benefits people.
Senator Murphy, Congressman Ellison, Tom Perez, thank you so much, and thank you for joining this conversation. Appreciate it.